Guy. Hi, and welcome to the new Beekeeper Guy. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of beekeeping stuff, I'm going to show you how I make kombucha. So I make a blueberry ginger kombucha, and I'm going to show you all the steps that I use to get a lovely fermented beverage, carbonated beverage called kombucha. Okay, here's my completed tea. This is 3 gallons of tea. Basically, for each gallon of water, I use 1 cup of sugar and 6 bags of tea. I use a combination of 4 green tea to 2 black tea per gallon of tea. So that's my tea, and it's been cooled to room temperature. So I've already got the tea done, and the bottles are ready. I'll show you some other stuff in a sec. Next, I take a big chunk of ginger, and I will skin the ginger, and then I will run it through our Champion juicer to make pure ginger juice, which I will then add with blueberries to make my puree that I put into the bottles. I use about a 1/4 cup of puree to each bottle. Alright, so I start with clean bottles. The 3 gallons that I make is usually about 21 bottles. These are the, I believe, 16-ounce pint bottles, and nice and clean, just came out of the dishwasher in sanitizer mode. So that's the first step. Alright, so I've got my ginger peeled, and now I'm going to cut it up. This one's almost like the size of a potato. That's a big piece of ginger, and it's going to produce a lot of juice. We'll probably get about 1 cup out of this, and I will see it doesn't fit into my Champion juicer, so I need to cut this in smaller pieces, and we'll juice her up. Alright, so I have leftover ginger pulp. This pulp is too nice to waste. So what I like to do is I dehydrate it, and I use it for teas later. So I'll pull all the pulp out of the juicer and put it in this bowl, and I'll dehydrate that, and it makes great flavoring for tea later. And it'll go good with honey too. Okay, so this is the ginger juice. It's got a thick, I don't know, consistency, almost a powder consistency to the bottom, so I like to stir it up. That's going to be about 1 cup of ginger juice. It's going to make a really strong gingery kombucha. I'm looking forward to that. It mixes with the blueberries super well. So I'm going to put this in a container and put it in the refrigerator for right now, and move on to cleaning my juicer and getting the blueberries prepped. So that's all right. The next ingredient that I like to put in is wild blueberries. You can use organic blueberries, but I started with not frozen blueberries, but I do such a big container of them now that I use this big bag. I put it in the blender and puree it up. Then I'll add the ginger, and that will be my puree that I put into each bottle. Pro tip, if you're thawing the blueberries in your refrigerator, put them in a bowl, because the condensation and sometimes the juice from the blueberries will spill all over your refrigerator, and you don't want to do that. I've done that. Alright, so I've got the blueberries in here. They're thawed. I like to match it with a little filtered water. I use the filtered water to get just about the same amount. That makes a nice thin, well, it's a thick puree no matter how you look at it, but that helps to grind it out a little bit so it becomes easily manageable, less chunks. Alright, I like to use a little plastic wrap on here, and I crank up my blender. These are good. First, you want to plug in your blender. That's always important. And I put it on the high speed. Work it up. All right, like I said, there's a powder that forms on the bottom of the ginger. It's It's a white type of powder. I don't know what it is. It's part of the ginger, but I stir it in there. And we've already blended our blueberries up. We want to make sure all of our juice is ready. This ginger juice is about a cup. And I add it to the puree. See, it's pretty full, so a little too full today. But I use the plastic to keep everything in. Just a quick stir. It's all stirred in there. And now I'm going to put a 1/4 cup in each bottle. 1/4 cup pour in each bottle. After I poured got a 1/4 cup in each one of these, I have some leftover blueberry juice, and it is so good to just drink it straight. It's blueberry and ginger juice. A lot of energy and power in that. Good. All right, now this is the really important and interesting stuff. This is where the chemistry comes in. Now, kombucha is a combination of sweet tea, and then it's fermented through a process of yeast and bacteria go to work on the sugars and the tannins in the tea. And what you need to put into your tea is what they call a S.C.O.B.Y. Now, this looks really gross. This is what turns most people off on kombucha, is this S.C.O.B.Y. Now, this is a S.C.O.B.Y. It's called a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. It looks like a little pancake. Now, what happens is these are some extra ones that I have from previous batches. But you put your tea into a glass container, you add a S.C.O.B.Y. and a little bit of the juice or a little bit of the kombucha from last time, and I leave it for about 2 weeks, and it ferments out, and that S.C.O.B.Y. will form a new S.C.O.B.Y. on top. So it's called a mother. So the mother goes in there, and after the fermentation is complete, the mother creates a baby. It makes a film on the top of the tea, and that holds in the carbonation. So when I pour it a little bit later to taste it, you'll see that it's carbonated. It turns into a fizzy beverage. So I'm just going to pour a little bit of it out so we can get a taste sample of what it tastes like. This is fresh kombucha. It's been in my closet for 2 weeks, and yeah, it's sweet. It's good. It's the perfect amount of fermentation because it's not quite like a vinegar, but it tastes more like an apple juice, a combination between apple juice and vinegar. So that's a good batch. So the baby comes out and the mother comes out, and I put them in here for holding while I prepare for the bottling process. So while I'm doing this, because everything's about fermentation and bacteria and yeast, I like to preserve this and make sure no other wild yeasts get in there. Just keep it covered to keep any bugs that might be in out. It's sanitary conditions are always a good idea when you're making kombucha because you're dealing with basically spoiled tea, but it does magical things in here and makes it goes from the sweet tea to kombucha by using that process of the culture of yeast and bacteria. It ferments it, but we'd still like to keep it covered when we're not working with it, just to keep all the yeast out, molds out too, to keep mold out as well. I like to use the caps. They're called crowns. I get them from a beer supply company. I use them because I use regular beer type bottles. These were old Sapporo bottles that I asked a sushi restaurant to collect from me, and these are the other ones that I bought. But I use these regular crowns, and I'll use a capper that I put on. I'll bottle it with this and show you in a minute. But what I like to do is sanitize it. I always like to keep everything that I have sanitized to avoid any cross-contamination of bacteria. Okay, so now I'm going to put, I've got my glasses on now so I can see. So I'm going to put my finished fermented kombucha into this delivery jar. It has a spigot on it. So it's, of all the ways to put it into the bottles, I found this is to be the easiest one. So make sure your valve is turned off. I've done that before. I poured it in when it was accidentally left on. So I'm going to pour this in to the delivery jar, and it's a nice clean. I've sanitized that jar. I'm going to pour almost all of it out and leave a little bit at the bottom. What I do is I like to get, that's good starter for my next batch. So I'm going to put that into my already completed tea. So just a little bit of starter into my tea for when I put it back in the jar to ferment it for another 2 weeks. This is the continuation process of how to make it. So I've got tea ready to go. I've got already made kombucha ready to put in the bottles, and I'll clean these out. I'll sanitize the jars, and that's when this whole bottling process is over. I'll pour the new tea into here. I'll add a mother, and I'll stick it in the closet. Okay, I like to use a headlamp. I know it makes it look like I'm a mad scientist or a coal miner or something, but it allows me to look inside the bottle. I'll put that on. I don't want to look at you. I'll blind you, I think. But it lets me look inside the bottles when I'm filling them. So I've got the bottle with 1/4 of a cup of puree in it. And I've got this dispenser. What I do is put the funnel in, and I fill it up slowly so it doesn't fizz over the top. I like to leave a little room at the top of the bottle for the secondary fermentation that will happen once they're capped. And I'll explain that a little bit later. So there we go. We have it filled to about there. I will do that with the rest of the bottles and come back to you later. The next step is to cap the bottles. What you do is you take the crown and you put it on the top. Well, you put it on the top. Use the capper. A capped bottle of kombucha. Now, all the bottles are capped. I have capped them all, and I did take the caps and I took them out of the sanitizer and I let them sit and dry out for a while. I did not put fresh sanitizer in the bottles. But what I do is after I've capped them all, I like to turn them over and mix up the puree a little bit with the kombucha. Just once. It'll be fine. It'll settle down. And then I place these into a box for 3 days for their second fermentation process. It's called finishing. And what that'll do is it'll give it a little bit more bubbles. It'll give it a chance for the blueberry puree to mix into the kombucha, and it makes for a nice purple colored kombucha like that. I'm already having one. That's the kombucha color. I'll show you a little bit later, but yeah, so I put them this way and I put them in a box. I write the date on the top. I'll show you that, and I'll put it in the closet for 3 days. All right, so the jars have been sanitized and cleaned. This is going to be my new batch of kombucha. What I'm going to do is take my jars and my new tea. The tea is the new tea, and it's got a little bit of starter in it. And I'm going to fill up these jars. Let's spill a little bit. The next step is to select a mother that I like. This one is a mother and a baby. These are both nice. I'm separating the mother and the baby. Well, that's just too nice to separate, so I'm going to put that one in their home. This one can go in there. That one looks good, and this is a beautiful one too. That one, I like the thicker one though. Here is the one that I'm going to use. All right, so next I'm going to just add a little bit of water to top those guys off. I'm going to do this with each one, push that in to mix it up. Then I'm going to take cheesecloth, cover the top, Put a rubber band on that. Keeps the creatures out. Lets it ferment. I'll put it in the closet for 2 weeks. And when I'm finished, we've got the whole process over again. So thanks again for watching the new Beekeeper Guy, Kombucha edition.
This has been the new Beekeeper and Kombucha Guy.
By the way, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments section and I'll get back to you. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel, all right? And hit the bell icon if you want to get any future videos that I might make. Thanks again. Take it easy. Bye.